All right, everyone. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to Youth Organizing in Real Time. If you're just joining us and trying to follow along in the chat, the introduction prompt here is to share your name and organization if you're working with one, or if you're representing yourself. It's all good. Go ahead and share that. Where are you located, and at what age did you discover your desired career path? And if that's a specific age, great. If you're still looking for that, great. Share. Feel free to share that too. So this is a safe space again for discovery. So my name is Mohan. I work with Our Turn. So honored and proud to be here with the Ed Trust family and so many friends from across the country. We'll go ahead and get rocking here, and I'm going to share what we're going to be talking about for the next roughly 30, 40 minutes. So first, the assumption is that we're all here because we believe in education justice, and we believe in transforming the education system to one that is pro-equity and pro-student. It only makes sense that we start by thinking about how do we rewire the pathway to education justice, because in many ways it hasn't been working. It has been working for generations. And what we have seen in real time is that really the only path to education justice is one that authentically engages young people as a part of that process. So we'll share a little bit more about what that means. Then we'll dig into some case studies. So this is about youth organizing in real time. And this is happening right now at a national level and at a local level. And we'll peel back the curtain so folks can understand what has been happening, share some best practices and some frameworks that can be applied in different contexts. We'll go into breakout groups so that you can actually put it to work and connect with youth leaders to get some advice, perspectives, build out work plans, and then ultimately build out commitments and how you are going to engage young people in your work towards education justice. And we'll share out on those commitments at the end of the discussion. So with that, I am very excited to be able to introduce you to an incredibly inspiring youth leader who will start to build out that case for authentic student engagement. So passing it over to Sid Fryer.
Thanks, Mohan. Yeah, I'll just quickly introduce myself. Like Mohan said, I'm Sid Fryer. I'm a high school senior based in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I've actually been involved with Our Turn and youth organizing in general for about a year and a half now, some at the state level, and I've now stepped into a new role as an executive fellow working to incorporate youth perspective at the national level. So I'll be talking a little bit about the case for authentic student engagement and more specifically what that looks like, kind of what the parameters are for really authentically engaging students. And I'd like to start off by saying that authentic student engagement promotes meaningful learning engagement, effective student-led solutions. And I'll kind of come back to this again, but solutions that are led by students are more likely to work. They're more likely to be effective. And we know that because it will create collective buy-in. Students will be more likely to participate and support in the solutions if they know that they're student-led and rooted in their feedback. It places education stakeholders at the table and distributes accountability. Whether depending on the campaign, those stakeholders could be legislators, they could be school officials, district officials, school board members. And really authentically engaging students does not look like letting them, deal with their business in a back room dealings or anything like that. No, it brings them to the table where students can actually reach them and effectively have meaningful discourse and get down to what it is that students need. Provides a space for students to be a part of planning, makes information accessible, gives students knowledge on solutions, really developing students as leaders and effective change makers and challengers. Like I said, it creates collective buy-in for solutions. We know that when solutions are rooted in what students want, then they're more likely to deal with them, right? And an example that I like to reference is right now in my school, I'm actually a student leader on the student government and in a couple different areas. And we are running into some problems with a particular administrator that is just not willing to take our feedback at all when it comes to logistical matters or, planning things. She doesn't want to hear it. And it has ended up, with student pushback, student body pushback. People are just not willing to go along with it because they know that it is not rooted in us and what's accessible and equitable for the diverse student body that we have. So, creating that collective buy-in. And then lastly, really, what do we have to lose? What do educators and stakeholders have to lose by incorporating youth feedback and by hearing what we have to say? The only thing really they have to gain is just a better knowledge and understanding of solutions that are equitable for us and accessible for us as students. So those are just a few parameters for what authentic student engagement looks like. And we'll keep moving to discuss a little bit about a few case studies that we've actually done at the national level, which I'll talk about, and then also in specific statewide coalitions at our turn. So the campaign that I'll be discussing is a national campaign that we did earlier this year in the spring semester of 2021 that I was involved in. It was our Raise Your Hand campaign, which was rooted around our turn's 5-point student agenda. Our agenda focuses on, a number of things, including student feedback in different areas, prioritizing mental health, learning centered on justice. And this campaign had the goal of ultimately reaching Department of Education Secretary Cardona and receiving his recognition. So there were a few different tactics that we used to do that, to elevate youth voices. One of those was storytelling. In my opinion, I was one of the people that worked on the communications working group, and storytelling was one of the most effective outlets that we had to elevate youth voices. So that was through op-eds. We published a number of op-eds and rapid response statements, videos, roundtable discussions that were recorded and popularized on social media, things like that. So really just taking students straight from them and putting it out in a way that was also accessible for fellow students to see what they were saying. Trainings, we did a month-long training series that focused on just giving students those hard organizing skills, really involving them in what our work is, what the student agenda is, seeing them once a week for a month to really just impart a lot of the work and the energy that we do at our turn. Online calls to action, and that includes a digital day of action, which I put in there. That was one of my favorite things to do because I love seeing the ways that it engaged students, right? We're talking about effective student engagement, and that's meeting them where they are. And a lot of times, particularly in a pandemic, that's online and on social media. And so a lot of what we did was, here, we'll share our digital toolkit with you, and you use our graphics to tweet to Secretary Cardona, put your own spin on it, and let him hear what you have to say if there's a specific demand you have. So that was something that we did to really effectively engage students and boost some of our student demands. We met with the Department of Education, myself and another student who's actually going to present later. We were two of the main students that were discussing different aspects of our student agenda with Department of Education policy officials, which was really empowering. It was a great way to kind of build a relationship and introduce them to our student agenda. And we had a diverse group of, I think, 5 or 6 students from across the country that really just came together on one meeting, and we said, here it all is. And then lastly, coalition building, obviously super important. We got 12 national other organizations to sign on to our student agenda. So again, just kind of elevating the presence of that agenda. And then lastly, I'll just talk a little bit about the results that we saw. And this picture is actually here from a campaign that we did where that bus, I guess, or that van drove through downtown streets with our student agenda on it, which was really empowering. It wasn't in my city, but to see that and think, oh my gosh, people are walking by hearing what we have to say. Like, how incredible is that? So one of those, again, was significant audience reach and digital actions. What I love about what our comms teams did is it was not just, retweet this. It was send in a photo of you and a quote saying what it is that you want to see from Secretary Cardona. So really mobilizing students to use their voice in that digital organizing space. Student input was required in ESSER plans, which was a huge step forward for, it aligned incredibly with the student agenda with our first demand, which is nothing about us without us, and emphasizing the importance of implementing student feedback. So student feedback was required in the distribution of ESSER plans and ESSER funds, which was huge. And then lastly, just on some of the federal policy education side, federal education fund increase has seen a 41% increase. Also huge, we'd love to see that funding heading towards equity and making our education system better. Biden has promised to double the amount of mental health professionals in schools, which aligns with our student demand of prioritizing our mental health and really making sure that students know that that is being put first. And then lastly, identifying the needs of underserved students, focusing on academic, social, emotional, and mental health needs through student engagement. Again, that aligns with the student agenda and our idea that students are intersectional beings and we deserve to be treated as such. And we deserve to be reviewed in a way that's holistic, that's academically, socially, emotionally. And so seeing that implemented at the federal level, I think was really important. So I will go ahead and pass it to some of our other students to discuss case studies at the state level.
Hi, I'm Avery Collinsbird, and I'm a digital fellow here at Our Turn. I'm based in LA. I go to UCLA. I'm a first year, and I'm here to speak to you about our efforts to getting a more inclusive pedagogy in our schools. This fall, Our Turn joined the Learn from History Coalition call on on schools across the country to teach an inclusive and fact-based history. Across the country, we are seeing a rise of legislators and school boards amid critical teachings of civil rights leaders and banning books that teach about our nation's history of systematic racism. Last month, I participated in a national town hall with over 2,500 attendees to elevate my concerns as a student about this issue. The Learn from History call was an over-the-phone call that consisted of Our Turn and many other organizations that spoke in support of keeping critical race theory in schools around the country after the news that North Carolina passed legislation against it, with many other states trying to follow. As you sat on the call, it consists less of people speaking at you, but you as a listener hearing other stories. These stories were amongst people of all ages, backgrounds, and speaking about their experiences in education and how it must change to become more diverse. Overall, the call was very accessible as you used a link to RSVP and when the time came received a call to join rather than log into a Zoom. We centered on lived experiences and collective storytelling from students, parents, teachers, superintendents, and community members. Making these issues accessible and relatable is our key in our ongoing coalition work. Focusing in on Los Angeles, over the summer, our LA team collected 150 survey responses from Los Angeles County students, teachers, parents, community leaders, and elected officials. Centering community and student voices through our surveys informed our organizing strategy. We heard an overwhelming majority of respondents demanding inclusive textbooks in our LA K-12 schools. Monday, the 18th at 5 p.m. Pacific time, we invite you all to attend our teach-in to receive an exclusive review of our report and insight to our Los Angeles work. Everyone, again, is invited to join our teach-in, and you can find that link on our Instagram, which is Our Turn CA, and then the link will be in the bio to RSVP. And with that, I'll pass the mic over to Molly O'Connor. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for being here with us today. My name is Molly O'Connor. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Senior Manager of Organizing for our Denver Coalition. I'm excited to talk to you a little bit more about our mental health campaign today, along with Zaria, one of our alumni student leaders who will hop in here in a second. And thanks, Avery, for passing it off. So in the fall of 2019, Denver students launched a campaign to increase mental health supports in Denver public schools and started taking action in pursuit of 3 new policies. The first was that a full-time mental health counselor would be hired in every single school in the district, that those counselors, second, or 1.5, as we sometimes call it, is that those new mental health counselors would be reflective in identity of the students that they would be working with. And the third was that all DPS staff, from teachers to coaches to school support staff, would receive a trauma-informed training every single year. And, students really drove these demands forward based off of their lived experience in schools, knowing that despite the fact that we're staffing social workers and nurses and counselors, we really needed mental health counselors because our current staff weren't enabled to prioritize mental health as their entire role in a school. And students also, saw that there were not culturally accessible and responsive resources for mental health in their schools as well. So over the course of our campaign, we found thousands of students who felt the same way that we did, and relationship building with those students and with others was really a really important tactic for us. So I'm going to pass it off to Zaria to talk a little bit about that.
Hi. I'm Zaria. I use she, her pronouns. I'm an organizing fellow, and I've been working with the Denver campaign for a while now. So, hi again, everyone. One way our one way that our turn built relationships during our campaign was by partnering with other organizations that focused on youth development, like Colorado Youth Congress, of which I've been a member of CYC and our turn for a while. Our collective relationship helped us get to meet with elected officials like Tay Anderson, Angela Cobian, and Jen Bacon.
Sorry. Yes, I'll jump back in. Meeting with those folks was really impactful for our campaign. It not only allowed us to build a relationship with the decision makers on our issue, but also gave us access to information about how we could make our demands a reality, not just in certain districts, but across the entire board. And we started to explore the budget process more. We started to build more power because we learned and knew that we needed to move these folks from a values alignment. They were all telling us, no one is going to sit in the meeting and say to students, mental health isn't important. And so there was definitely agreement on that, but we really needed to push them to act, and specifically to align resources with the need for more mental health supports in Denver public schools. And one tactic that we saw that was really successful that you've already heard about is storytelling. And I'm going to pass it back to Zaria to share a little bit more about how we use that in the mental health campaign.
So in building power, we wanted to center elevating student voices. We used digital media, traditional media, and took advantage of opportunities to share voices directly with decision makers through organizing tactics like testimony and letter writing campaigns. Above, you can see a few examples of digital student storytelling. When leaders were confronted with real stories from schools in our cities, we saw an increase in willingness to come to our table and take action.
Thanks so much, Zaria. And I think what Zaria said there, come to our table, is such an important piece of this. Once we delivered our petition signature, showed our power, and started really continuously applying pressure to these folks, we were not only seeing a greater willingness to act, but leaders, elected officials saying, we want to meet with you. When can we come to your space and be on your time and your agenda? And the storytelling helped get us there. The relationship building really helped get us there too. And understanding our system and the budget a little bit better was huge for us as well. And as you can see on the screen, all of those tactics eventually led us just now in the beginning of 2021 to get our district's budget advisory committee to allocate $1.5 million towards a pilot program that is going to be staffing these mental health counselors in Denver public schools this year and for the next 3. And this felt, super meaningful, super huge for us for a couple of reasons. The first is that we not only got them to spend the money, but we got them to introduce an entirely new staffing position in the largest school district in Colorado. Schools are not staffing mental health counselors. They're not investing in positions that support the student body broadly in terms of their wellness, their stress and anxiety management, and their social emotional needs. And now in 15 schools across our district, they are starting to make that investment. And I think that's the other reason that it felt so important and like such a celebratory moment, because these are real resources that are going to be in our schools impacting student experience this year. And so just to see that, student stories and relationship building and leadership not only can push our spaces to think differently, but actually shift our resources to improve student experience in schools. That's what it's all about. So we were super excited and hope y'all enjoyed learning about the awesome work that's happening across the country. Huge shout outs to Sid, Avery, and Zaria for pushing it forward. And I'll pass it back to Mohan. I think we're going to hit some exciting breakout groups. So thanks again, y'all.
Incredible. Much thanks, y'all, for sharing out on some of those case studies. And I just want to note that the youth movement for education justice, our turn is one part of We've shared some our turn examples here, but I'd be remiss if I didn't just shout out the many incredible organizations doing this type of work in communities all across the country. You've got Kentucky Student Voice Team, Teens Take Charge, Ed Trust Tennessee, a group of California youth that were involved in this recent passing of an ethnic studies course, which is really just transformative and hopefully will set a positive example for the rest of the country. So these are not just little one-offs. This is absolute momentum, and hopefully a tidal wave that will really, again, as I noted earlier, rewire the way that we do this work for education justice. And on that note, we're actually going to start really working on it together. So here's what's going to be happening in these breakout groups. We're going to split into a few. The folks you've been hearing from thus far will be in some of the different breakout groups, and this is meant to be a forum where there could be some Q&A, where there can be some discussion and development of commitments. So here are a few prompts to keep in mind as you step into those different groups and those settings. For one, it's always valuable to just know in your landscape, wherever you're operating, nationally or locally, who are the other youth organizations that are out there. Because in many cases, there are organizations that have been doing this work, that have been advocating, that have been doing storytelling, and they should be allies with you, and you should be reaching out to them. So it's good to be able to identify, who those folks are. Second, are there upcoming political windows that require youth organizing and leadership? We've noted several throughout the conversation already. There could be more. Budgets, superintendent selections, school board elections, and more. So it's good to be able to identify also those political windows. What are the existing mechanisms for facilitating youth and adult partnerships? There may not be any in your landscape right now, and that's okay. That's why we're here, so that we can be able to work on that. So we can think about what those mechanisms could be. They could look like student advisory councils. They could look like other nonprofit organizations, fellows within organizations. There are a lot of different ways to be able to bring that to life. And one thing that we do ask everybody to be able to come out of the conversation with, and hopefully if you're willing to actually share by chat when we close out, is to actually make a pledge. And here is your line to be able to fill in. I will commit to BIPOC youth engagement by blank. And we want you to be able to fill that in, to be able to share that out. So those are the prompts, and we're going to move into the breakout groups now.
Hey Sid, you need to join a breakout room? All right, let's see. Went to the breakouts and then you click join room 2. All right, let's hit a do a refresh and then come back in and see if you can join in.
All right, so I believe we've got people coming back from the breakout rooms now. Sorry for the folks who are in my breakout room. We got cut off. We had a good conversation going. Could one of the Ed Trust folks just let me know if we've got everybody back now, or if we should hang for a second? All right, I think we got folks back. So, thanks everybody for engaging. I know in my group it was I think it was a good discussion. Some questions and ideas were raised. Good to see a good diverse array of youth engagement that's in process right now in places like LA, Washington State, Rochester, New York. But yeah, this is a journey in many ways, right? You might have places where you're just getting started and building out a structure for youth engagement. Some where maybe you already have that structure, but you need more people to actually hear what young people have to say. Maybe in some spaces they've been hearing it, but then the decision making still is being done by the same folks who have been doing it for generations. So then you need to be able to close that gap. So like there are a lot of different points of intervention. What I'd love to do here before we close, I think maybe two things in parallel. One is invite any other folks from our turn who are facilitating some of the groups if they want to jump in and just share any highlights from your groups, and also for everybody who's here, please drop in the chat. What is your pledge? What is your commitment? We heard some good commitments in my group, and would love for folks who are there to be able to share in the chat. And anybody else, what will you commit to do for BIPOC youth engagement? So again, you can drop that in the chat, and if there's anybody who was in one of those breakout groups who wants to come off mute for a moment and just share what the conversation was like.
I can quickly share. I really appreciated my group members. We went a little vulnerable and started to think through what are norms and things that we as adult allies can do to really hold space for empower young people, specifically young students of color in particular. Went through exploring just best practices and ways in which I think the pandemic especially created just really interesting opportunities and different that I think normal organizing looks like on the ground. But I think just that critical conversation, which is really helpful and really sticking with me, especially around meeting young people where they're at and checking any assumptions that adults often have in spaces from like past experience or from any just unconscious biases that are just like present too.
Yeah, I also came in a little late, had some technical difficulties, and then we got cut off at the end. But there was some really meaningful conversation around political windows that are opening and some of the youth organizations that are already in their landscape that maybe aren't advocacy based, but that folks in the room recognized as meaningful organizations that were really focusing on that BIPOC youth engagement. We talked a little bit about accountability and how maybe there are structures in place to implement student feedback, but if there's little oversight and little accountability, that it's not really getting implemented. And that kind of goes back to those parameters that we set for meaningful youth engagement about bringing those stakeholders to the table. So I really appreciated that kind of analysis about some existing structures that exist that just may not be fulfilling what they're there to do. And then we were wrapping it up, and I was talking a little bit about some of the best ways that I have seen to effectively engage students in meeting them where they're at, and kind of going along with that co-creation piece of what we're doing at our turn in terms of developing content and ideals and demands and agendas that are really rooted in student voice and feedback. So that was just a little bit of our conversation. I'd love to see some of those pledges come through. I'm actually writing out mine right now. Oh, here we go. We got a couple.
Love those pledges, folks. Thank you for sharing. Des and Sid, thank you for facilitating and sharing out from your groups. So before we just share some final takeaways, again, invite folks to share their pledges in the chat, and also in the chat, if you have any closing questions or things that are on your mind, please go ahead and drop that in. So we'll take a moment for any of those pledges and or questions to come into the chat. It's really inspiring pledges, folks. Thank you. All right, so to wrap us up, please continue to drop them in, tweet them out. If you are so inclined. Also, you can drop in any questions as I just give some quick voiceover to the takeaways that you see here on this slide. Back to what we shared at the very beginning. There is no justice in education without the elevation of BIPOC youth experiences and leadership. We can't just continue as leaders in this space to only think about the policy at the end of the day, or just the latest silver shiny object that might be in front of us. We have to do some work to actually confront the realities of the how that led us to where we are. And that how is a process that has historically disenfranchised youth voice. It has historically disenfranchised communities of color. We have to fix that. That is the only way we get to education justice. That is the only path, is by centering and elevating BIPOC youth experiences and leadership. Also, Sid was just talking about accountability. Make a year-round commitment. So this should not only be like, all right, I've got a big political window. There's an election that's coming up in a couple of weeks. So let me make sure young people are heard. And then the election happens and then you move on. And then young people aren't heard again. Because really they weren't heard to begin with if it was only for a few weeks. This has to be something that you can consistently work on. It's a learning journey for all of us. Even at our turn, it's a learning journey. We're still looking in the mirror to see how we can be better at this process. And that is a call to action for every one of us here. So build those structures, build those mechanisms, collect feedback, collect input, share stories, evaluate, have accountability. Just keep going back to that. And that connects to the final piece, which is that this is a journey. Education justice is a journey. We're not going to solve it overnight. And when it comes to youth engagement, this is a generational challenge. So we need to just continue to work on it, but don't be afraid to seek out help. We are here from the Our Turn side to be able to help. I know there are some incredible folks from the EdTrust side who are really passionate about this work, and many others across the country. Even if, for our team, if we're not directly located in your community or your state, we can probably get you connected with somebody who can, or provide some sort of support or training to help you to get there. So feel free to reach out because we want to be able to help and to be allies on this journey so that we can truly co-design and co-conspire towards a future where education justice is real and not just a pipe dream that we've been talking about for a long time, but not actually making real progress towards. And with that, you're not at an Our Turn event if you don't hear from Tupac or Kendrick Lamar. So you're going to hear from Tupac this time. And hopefully y'all recognize the song, but just some quick bars: bring truth to the youth, tear the roof off the whole school. That's what we're about. All right. This is not just truth to the youth. This is truth from the youth. And what that's going to do is it's going to revolutionize the education system. It's time that we finally reimagine it, and we have a chance to do it because of the resources, the public will, the commitment, the people who are here in this room. So let's go out and make it happen. So much thanks to everybody who joined. Much love to all of you. Wishing you the best as you continue on this work and journey. Thank you to the Our Turn team for everything that you did to present, and EdTrust for hosting.